Again, I'm Liz Wharton. I'm with CISA and ICS Village, and we're about to welcome in Drew Batten. And Drew is an Industrial Control Systems Incident Response Section lead with the Industrial Control Systems section within CISA, and also serves as an officer of the International Information Systems Security Certification Consortium. Yeah, Drew, that's alphabet soup right there. ISC squared, Idaho chapter, and is a cyber warfare operations officer and flight commander with the Air National Guard. Prior to joining the Industrial Control Systems section, he worked for the Industrial Control Systems Computer Emergency Response Team, the National Information Assurance Training and Education Center, and the United States Air Force. And Drew's going to be joining us and talking about control environment laboratory resource and the unique research and training lab available through CISA. So Drew, about to hand it over to you. If you save any time at the end for questions, I encourage everyone to put those into the questions or chat feature, and we will get to them as time permits. But welcome.
Thanks, Liz. Hey, can you confirm for me, Liz, is everything showing correctly for those who are viewing right now?
Should be. It is for me. So that I'm not getting a thumbs down from the rest of the team. So I'd say rock and roll and do that voodoo that you do.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. As Liz just mentioned, so my name is Drew Batten, and I'm a incident response analyst here at CISA. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what we call our Control Environment Laboratory Resource, or CELR for short, because that's quite a mouthful. And CELR is CISA's unique research and training lab that's been purpose-built for training, research, and testing within industrial control systems. I'm going to go ahead and jump in and first just quickly go over the agenda. So I'm going to start off just by giving an overview of what CELR is. After we go over that overview, I'll talk to you about what we call Skids, which are our scaled down miniaturized versions of our real world industrial control systems process. And then from there, we'll move on to the primary use cases for CELR. And then I'll finish off by talking about some of our current partnerships, as well as some partnerships we hope to develop in the future. And then I'll finish off the presentation part. I'll finish off the slides at that point and move into a video. And I'm limited to about a 20 to 25 minute speaking time slot. So the video is about 10 minutes of the demonstration. So I do plan on going through a lot of the material in these slides fairly quickly, but I'm happy to spend as much time as people have interest in to answer questions at the end. All right, so just starting off with a nice BLUF here. So CELR is all about having the real equipment, the real processes, and the real types of communication protocols and interactions between all the different parts and pieces. CELR is different and really special because while a lot of places that do this type of research maybe have a couple of controllers or PLCs, and then they maybe hook it up to a switch or a computer here and there to do testing, and they're doing modeling, they're trying to do prediction, and they're trying to say, well, I think if I do this on device A, this is how it's going to interact on device B. And they have to model that and virtualize that and simulate that. Whereas in CELR, since we have all of those different parts and pieces, when we do thing on device A, we actually see on device B, on that physical device that we're sitting next to, the impact. If it breaks it, if it makes it run hot or run faster or slower, we see that. We don't have to guess, we don't have to model, we don't have to simulate. We see those things happening. The second point here, we can do this research and testing and training and experimentation without any of the catastrophic consequences. For example, if I'm a chemical plant manager for chemical manufacturing, and I have someone come to me and say, hey, we have a new model of this device that's in your environment. If you implement that device, you could really see an improvement in efficiency, which means more money, right? And as a plant manager, that sounds really good to me. But one risk I take if I want to go ahead and implement that new device is I risk having a negative impact on my process. What if when I introduce this new piece of equipment, it breaks things or stops my process? All of a sudden, I could be looking at a situation where I've just ruined a batch of my chemical product, which could be thousands or hundreds of thousands or maybe $1 million, depending on the kind of product and the size. Whereas in a lab environment like CELR, we have that same chemical process that's simulated. We have all the same parts and pieces, and I'll show you that in the next slide. And we can do that testing, we can do that research, and we can do it without the catastrophic consequences. We can plug in that new device and run something and say, hey, this works great. Or we can plug it in and run it and say, yeah, this actually did break the process, so we don't recommend you do that until you make these certain changes. The goal of CELR, holistically, the goal is to be able to improve our entire nation's cyber posture when it comes to our nation's critical infrastructure. And by that, I don't mean that CELR is just a resource for CISA. It's not just for CISA's government partners. It is something that we want everyone and anyone who has a stake in critical infrastructure, any asset owner and operator, we want you to know that this resource is available to you, and we want you to be able to leverage it so that you can improve your cyber posture when it comes to the critical infrastructure that you run, so that overall we can make our nation safer and protect our nation's critical infrastructure. And then the final bullet point here is funded through federal funds that are typically given to the threat hunting branch within CISA, and then those typically trickle down to the industrial control system section. So you've heard me a couple times already refer to what we call skids. And skids are essentially scaled down industrial process models. And I have four examples here, and I'll talk to 3 of them because the building management system on the bottom right is the one that I have in the demo. And I talk about that pretty well in depth. So the things I want to direct your attention to and focus on are that the components within each of these skids are the exact same components that you would see in a real world process. That there's one of these. For example, if you were to go to an electrical distribution station in your local area or in your region, you're going to see these same RTACs, these same protection relays, and you're going to see the breakers and switches that control the flow of that electricity. And each of these skids have a cyber physical impact built in to where a red team or a adversary can come in and attack these skids, and you can see the real world physical impact. For example, you can attack this skid, and instead of the connection being closed, allowing power to flow through, you can attack and open those breakers, cutting off the connection and flow of electricity, and as a result, people have an outage. On the pipeline compressor station, you can see again here in this control cabinet, this is the same kind of equipment and the same kind of what we call an HMI that you'd see in a pipeline station, as well as all the same equipment you would see, and we're able to simulate things like contamination of the pipeline or over pressurization or too much of a wrong mixture when it comes to natural gas and oil or other particulates that are filtered out, coming out of here and simulating like a small explosion or a flame out. With the chemical manufacturing skid here at the bottom, you can see we have multiple tanks, we have sensors and valves and pumps, and we can simulate several things from an attacker perspective, like overfilling a tank or mixing material that shouldn't be mixed, and multiple different combinations. And again, I'll skip the building management skid and let you see that in the demo later on. So now that we've talked about kind of the overview and what the skids are, I'm going to move into talking about 3 primary focus areas, and then I'll use the 4th column here to talk about a few of the things that make CELR unique and special. So incident response training and hunt training. This is really cool. We're able to develop and build very customizable scenarios. And let me give you an example. Let's say we have a Cyber Command CPT that comes to us, and they say, hey, we'd really like to leverage the opportunity that you have at CELR to come do training with hunt and incident response and industrial control systems. And they could even say, hey, by the way, our next deployment or our next mission is going to take us to this part of the world. In addition to that, when we go to that part of the world, we're planning to go up against this adversary. So we at CISA and in the CELR team, we can go ahead and go online or use our internal intelligence or use resources like the MITRE ATT&CK framework And we can say, okay, we know that this particular adversary uses these attack techniques and these attack methods and these types of tools. And so when we build our environment for this CPT from the Department of Defense to come in and train on, when we build this environment, we can attack that environment so that it looks just like that adversary has attacked it. And so when this CPT comes into that environment, they're looking at an environment that's been compromised and attacked, just like they may run into when they go on mission and deploy. Furthermore, this is a very immersive training environment. For example, we have people that represent customers from the company that has been compromised. So the team that comes in and does this 1 or 2 week simulation, they have to report to and they have to interact with a CEO, an IT administrator, and also a representative that is in charge of controlling that industrial control systems process. So when the CPT is doing a good job of protecting that environment, it's going to reflect as such in the interactions they have with those company representatives. On the other side of that coin, if they're failing to keep the their interactions are going to get pretty difficult, and the CEO that represents that company is going to let that CPT know, hey, I'm not happy with the way you're doing this. I'm not happy that I'm losing money because you cannot protect my process. And I'll move on to the second column here, vulnerability discovery. So a great example to demonstrate what I mean by this is, imagine we have a vendor that comes out and they say, hey, we have this particular device. A researcher or we internally have just discovered that there's a vulnerability for this device. It's pretty serious, and we recommend that all of our customers that have this device go ahead and implement this patch. So if we don't already have that device in CELR, we can go ahead and acquire it. We can plug it into one of our skids, and we can test that out. We can test the attack on it to see if it's successful and what kind of damage it allows us to do. Furthermore, after we've done that, we can go ahead and apply that patch from the vendor and try to attack it again to just validate the effectiveness of that patch, and then see if there are any workarounds or ways to get around that patch and still attack it. And if there are, we can work with the vendor to develop an additional patch and work with them to inform the public. Impact and consequence analysis is the third column and third thing I'm going to talk about here. Really, to boil down to its most simplistic explanation, what I mean by impact and consequence analysis is the what if research and testing. What if I update my device? What if I change my configuration? What if I try to scan it or ping it 100 times in a very short amount of time? Does it break it? Does it reset it? Does it turn it into an expensive paperweight? What happens? And furthermore, we can do that and share those results with the community, with the public, without having the public to test it for themselves and deal with the consequences of those actions in a real world running environment, like I talked about earlier with the chemical plant manager. Unique capabilities is the fourth thing I want to talk about on this slide. So some of the things that really make CELR stand out, in addition to having the real equipment and the real processes and the different pieces on each of the skids, are that not only can we provide that defensive training, but we can also provide the opportunity for people to come in and actually practice attacking industrial control systems environments. In addition to that, we have the ability to provide remote access. So given the current situation where travel is restricted for a lot of our partners and a lot of people, though we prefer to have teams come out in person and train, that remote access is available. So this can all be done remotely. And then the final point here is isolation. If a partner or a vendor or someone were to come to us and say, hey, we have this equipment or we have this data set, we'd really like you to do some sort of analysis on it, but it needs to be in a separated environment, and we need to ensure that that information doesn't leak out of that environment. We have the infrastructure, we have the people, and we have all the hardware that allows us to do that. So this is going to be the final slide I go over before I pass it to John and Liz to play the video. So I do have it in the presentation, but audio doesn't come through, so I'll pass it to them here in a moment. On this slide, just talking about the partnerships we have. We have a great partnership with ICS Village, and we're really looking forward to continue to build that and strengthen that partnership. Through ICS Village, we've been able to participate in a couple of events, like of course, Hack the Capitol today, but also at DEF CON, we were able to help develop and build out the Hack the Planet, Capture the Flag competition. And we were actually able to provide remote access to over 270 competitors to be able to access these skids and hack into the skids. That was a really cool experience. In addition to some of those private partnerships or private sector partnerships that we have, we're also working with a couple of different cyber protection teams right now, both on the Army and Air Force side, to come in and actually leverage CELR for training. And then the next point here is federally funded research and development centers. We have multiple partnerships with multiple FFRDCs to help us to continue to evolve and mature and develop CELR. And some of those are listed below, like with Johns Hopkins APL, PNNL, and then INL as well. So those are some of the current partnerships we have. And we hope to continue to develop in the future partnerships with vendors, as well as private sector critical infrastructure asset owners and operators. And let's see, looks like I am right at above my time. So Liz and John, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you so you can play that video, and then I will hang out for after that video to answer any questions people may have.
Excellent, Drew. Thank you. And we'll get that video teed up and going right now.
Thanks. Is that audio coming through, Liz?
It should be. I know we were having issues before where the volume needed to be turned up really high, so we apologize to anyone if that is not coming through on the session. We will get that updated and corrected, and a different link posted on the ICS Village website.
Okay. So I guess if the audio is not working, do we want to go ahead and provide a link to that later and take questions now if there are any, or how would you like to proceed with that, Liz?
Yeah, let's do that. If anyone has any questions, and yeah, I see all the notes that the audio is causing difficulties. So, and if anyone has any other questions on some of the programs, I mean, we are excited that y'all have been able to do so much with the ICS Village, and of course, look forward to doing more in person when that circumstances permit. But really, what has been some of the transition for y'all as well from going into virtual? Because you don't have those a lot of the same in-person hands-on learning experiences.
So going virtual or remote and building out that capability was definitely a challenge, but it was something that we actually were put in a position where we had to develop that capability and had to do it pretty quickly, especially for DEF CON that came up. You know, I think everyone, whether you were on the goon side or whether you were on a participant side, I think everyone was looking forward to being able to go there and do that in person. But we wanted to make sure people had the opportunity to attack these skids remotely, right? And so we set up a what we call an outreach environment, which is separate from our kind of internal, more protected environment. And then, of course, just leverage tools that are available and out there to set up the VPN and provide that secure access so participants could gain that and still play. And that's essentially the same kind of infrastructure and architecture that we use for partners that want to come in and train versus doing outreach events like DEF CON or Hack the Capitol or others.
Excellent. And we have one of the questions in the chat. I apologize if it had not, but asking for a list of make and model gear on the building automation skid.
Sure. So I'm guessing the thing that you're probably mostly interested is like the control side piece. I mean, the other things, there's a lot of 3D printed equipment in there, and just like fans or like the ventilation system is just made up of, you know, computer fans, and similar for the the airflow that we have in the data center on the building management system skid. But the actual control piece and the software for our building management system skid consists of the Oasis software and an Allerton controller, which are very representative. If you're familiar with BMS, that's very representative of some of the equipment and software that you're going to see in the field.
Excellent, thank you. And so again, resources is, what are some good links to find additional information or upcoming events as well?
Sure. So CISA has a lot of outreach and a lot of ways that we interface with the public. You can always go to like the CISA website. That we have multiple social media accounts. So if you're on social media, definitely encourage you to check out CISA. And whenever there are events coming up, for example, we have what we call ICS JWG, which stands for Industrial Control Systems Joint Working Group. That's going to be coming up here in just a week, where there'll be multiple technical presentations, as well as just more experts from the community have come together, and we'll be giving presentations and talking about important topics that they run into. So yeah, I would say check out our online presence, and of course reach out to us if you have a contact within CISA. We're always super happy and excited to reach out and develop relationships with the community.
And one of the other questions in the chat is, what is the future plan for CELR and the types of skids that are under development?
Sure. So right now we have 5 different skids that are representative of 5 different sectors of critical infrastructure. For example, I showed you a few. We have one that represents the chemical sector. We have some for the electrical, and then we have a building management system. We also plan to develop, we have a couple that are in development right now. For example, we're working on developing a wastewater treatment plant skid, and then using dyes and chemicals to, be able to demonstrate and visually see that process of dirty water coming in, being cleaned, and then how you can attack that to cause contamination. Long-term goals is to be able to have one skid that represents each of the 16 different sectors of critical infrastructure. So if someone comes to us, we can provide that choice. And whether they want to train on a transportation system or a train or a subway, or they want to train on something within the electrical grid, we can say, hey, we do have a process for that. We have an environment for that where you can come and train.
Thank you. And somebody dropped the link in the questions for more information on the ICS Joint Working Group. So if you haven't, for those attending, if you haven't checked it out, please do so. And really, thank you again, Drew, for coming in and sharing, and for all the work that y'all have done. It's been a pleasure working with y'all. And a quick shameless plug for everyone to jump over to our track 1, which will be hosting the lunchtime keynotes. And again, we will post a video or link to the video from Drew's presentation as well on the ICS Village website, or ICS Village website, as well as get that added to the YouTube channel as well, because it's a great walkthrough. Yeah, for once I'm in the know and have the inside track on having seen the video. But thanks again, and we will pause